Hello there, I'm John and I'm going to do a walkthrough of creating an adventure in Foundry VTT starting from scratch. For this D20 rules-based fantasy adventure, like all right-minded souls, did I mean like-minded souls, I'm using the Pathfinder 2nd edition system. And the people who pass their perception checks at the bottom of the screen, where my big head is just about out of the way, will see that I'm using version 12, build 327. Yep, that's correct. I succeeded my fear check for updating to Foundry to version 12. I thought it would be a more useful guide if I'm using the current system going forward. By way of aside, I can report from a very brief check that for Pathfinder 2nd edition, the most important modules are working, certainly for adventure creation. For running the game, many of us use automated animations, and they're not quite working yet, but hopefully they'll be updated over the next few weeks. So what will I be doing in this video series? I'll be creating a new world, an original adventure, not a port of a published adventure, which will allow us to think about adventure design as we go, and you can criticize all my terrible design choices. I'll therefore be creating journal notes to use as the account key, and the rest of the text of the adventure, tactical maps for which I'll mainly be using Dungeon Alchemist, images to show the players, and streamlining as far as I can in-game checks to help games run smoothly. I'll be reading the journal notes as I create them, so I'm hoping it'll be like reading a new adventure as a GM, certainly something I enjoy doing, and it'll be like a dry run of GMing the adventure in Foundry VTT. We might even run through some trial combats and show off some add-on modules. We'll be converting this world, as Foundry VTT calls it, into a module as we go, so that the complete adventure can be archived or exported for others to use. So my knowledge level, certainly I would not describe as being an expert. I've created a couple of large adventures in Foundry VTT so far, and I've been learning as I go and hope to continue learning in this walkthrough, both existing materials and new materials as we work through the new features of version 12. Any comments in the form of tips will be very gratefully received. I must gratefully thank the players of my online gaming group for their enthusiasm, their encouragement, and sometimes their forbearance with respect to the questionable design choices I make. I'm slightly experimental, and in getting to learn the VTT. So to start, first thing we do is create the world. This is what the Foundry VTT calls the adventure. These are some ones I've created already. What we want to do now is create a new world, so we go on to the Create World tab and create our new world. I'm going to call this Strife in Grimbone, and because it's our practice world, Strife in Grimbone walkthrough. The game system we're going to use is Pathfinder 2nd edition. I don't think we need to change these things, but we need a bit of blurb for a world description, and I'm now referring to my pen and paper module, which I'll be doing lots of copy and pasting from. It's because you don't want to see me typing from scratch, believe me. And let's make it a little bit nicer by justifying it. So, the aid of worthy adventurers has been sought by the lakeside town of Pendaka to investigate the lack of contact with the outlying settlement of Grimbone. This apparently simple mission thrusts the players into an ongoing adventure where events of the distant past have led to a present of supernatural terrors and scheming villains. This adventure is intended for around 4 first-level PCs. It will take them up to 6th level by the end. This is standard fare for an introductory adventure. The history of Strife in Grimbone is long and full of strife. Actually, I first had the idea for a RuneQuest adventure. I don't know if any of you remember RuneQuest, but I think it's still going, and it's characterized by quite a complicated combat system with area-based damage on different parts of your body, and the other feature of it was the bizarre monsters that they had called Brew, where there were creatures who had the heads of goats or other animals. And it was the brew that then inspired future versions of the Strife and Grimbone to use beast folk. I believe there was a D&D 3rd edition version, then there was a Neverwinter Nights computer version, and then obviously Pathfinder 2nd edition pen and paper version. Now there's a VTT, or there will be. So enough without further ado, we'll create our world. Now we see Strife and Grimbone appearing, so we'll launch that. And join as the game master. We don't need to set a password. And here we have the loading page of a world in Pathfinder in Foundry VTT. We don't need to look at the remaster changes. We've been remastered already. And we see a couple of tabs already appearing by way of introduction. Just to review, this is the chat messages tab, where we see the results of hits or throws, rolling of dice. Is that what we do? Yeah, we roll dice. Encounters is the combat tracker. Scenes is where we have our tactical maps. We have actors here, which includes PCs, NPCs, hazards, loot bags. Items, which are actors that don't do anything but have things done to them, like magical items or plot items. The journal, which we'll be using. Rollable tables, which I think we'll use for random encounters. I'm not intending to use card stacks. We can talk about background music if the time arises. Compendium packs is where we have assets that don't belong to the world, but we can access and import into the world if we want. This might include the standard Pathfinder 2nd edition bestiaries, or things that you might use for creating a character. And finally we have the game settings. So what should we do first? Well, we need an introduction if we are porting a pen and paper adventure into Foundry VTT. The way we do that is by creating journal entries. So first of all, we'll create a folder and we'll call it Introduction. Oops. We'll have it manual rather than alphabetically sorted because we don't want to we want to have introduction first and then the chapters, obviously. And while we're at it, why don't we have a folder for the players to put journal entries in? We open the introduction folder and start our first page. I'm going to call this adventure background. And slightly non-intuitively, you create a journal and then you have to add a page to the journal. You can't just start typing here. There's another layer to go down. And the first thing I like to start off is a bit of historical background. The history. So I'm going to cut and paste now. If cutting and pasting is boring, believe me, watching me type is even more boring. When we do this, I sometimes like to just check that the formatting has come through okay. And if I want to standardize my formatting, I press this tab to clear it, just to get the standard formatting system for VTT. During the creation of the VTT version, I think it'd be nice to have some extra elements where we talk about how we're going to run the adventure, especially for new GM, rather than just directly copy and paste a pen and paper version. And it'd be nice to make that text quite stand out. We can do this in the editor of Foundry VTT. I think I'll make it non-italic. So I go into alignment, inline, untick the italics. We can do this by setting a different block, and we'll select this line here and block secret. I think that secret block was originally intended to show journal pages to players but hide parts of the page and then reveal them as you wished. I don't use that system. I prefer to have a separate journal to show players or just show them individual pictures. But it's still useful to give a different looking kind of text to stand out. So I've got here, you may wish to read this to players by way of introduction and foreshadowing. Some people will think that they should drip feed players information, the background history. Obviously, it's a very common story writing device to thrust the players straight into the action, the protagonist straight into the action, and then step back a bit after that action scene and give some background that led to how you got to that action point in the first place. It's perhaps an easier technique that I use just to give the players, get them into the mood by giving them a little bit of historical background, getting them into their sort of fantasy zone, getting their fantasy juices flow. So here we have 10,000 years ago, Earthfall, a mighty swarm of meteors that fell upon the world, brought about the destruction of the ancient Thessalonian Empire in present-day Varissia on the west coast of Avestan. But it is told that the 7 evil rulers of Thessalon, the so-called Rune Lords, escaped the cataclysm and slumbered for thousands of years in hidden demi-plane sanctuaries, waiting for the opportunity to reclaim their rightful places as rulers of New Thessalon. And indeed, Kazug, Rune Lord of Greed and ruler of the Thessalonian realm of Shelast, was woken by accident in the year 4702 AR. He used his hapless awakener to gather an army ready for his full manifestation in flesh and blood upon the material plane, but before he could do so, he was destroyed by heroes in 4707. Yet ancient legacies of Kazug's rule in Shalast remain. The magics of the Rune Lords have partially preserved their ruined cities and monuments from the ravages of time, though most are lost and reclaimed by local wildernesses, such as the sinister Ashwood in central Varissia. It is said by the wise that sins lie long upon the lands that fostered them, and that the sins of the Rune Lords still lie heavy upon the Ashwood and its environs. So I would start by reading that to the players, and then we will talk about the GM's introduction and eventually the player's introduction. So we save that, and now it appears, this is the editor and this is the actual journal viewer. So you can see that this is a Rune Lords adventure. Hopefully you're not too bored with Rune Lords. It could be Return of the Rune Lords. I'm hoping it's not Return of the Return of the Rune Lords. You can also see something I find interesting. The date 4702 AR. AR stands for Arrogant Reckoning, for those who haven't spent too much time in the world of Galarion. And Aradin was the god of humans who is said to have died. When Paizo created their first adventure, it was based around 2002, and maybe a little bit later than that. But what they did, which is I think is quite a nice system, is every year that passes in Galarion, according to the Galarian calendar, Galarion is the main fantasy world that Paizo creates for Pathfinder, is a year that passes in the real world. So Paizo created an adventure, the Rune Lords adventure, for Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition, funnily enough, before they even created the Pathfinder role-playing system. And in that adventure, they were battling the Rune Lords, Kazug, and it was the year 4707, which corresponds to 2007. Now, obviously, the year being 2024, the year in Galarion is 4724, and many events have passed since. I like the continuity and the idea that we're still playing the same timeline 20 years later. Some players might imagine themselves, or might have actually been those heroes who destroyed Kazug in 4707, and several years later they're trying to prevent the next cataclysm to befall the world. the gap is so long that you can imagine some players' children are following in the footsteps of their heroic parents who played the game in a previous generation. Anyway, that's the history. What should we do next? Let's do a Game Master's introduction, so they've got a little bit more information, set the scene for the Game Master to read the adventure. We'll add another page. GM's introduction, our editor opens up, and I'll do some cutting and pasting. Sometimes this formatting has come through, but if it doesn't, I like to press that just to make sure. The PCs find themselves in the lakeside fishing town of Pindaka. The largely peaceful town borders a dark forest known as the Ashwood, lying between Claybottom Lake and the Skull River to the west, and the plains around Abgan to the east. This is a case of a picture telling 1,000 words, or what we really mean is a map telling 1,000 words. It would be nice to have an image, and this is where things become complicated for Foundry VTT, at least in my opinion. We can't just attach images and include that as part of the world. The assets that belong to the world that we create are the scenes, but this is not the actual pictures that you use for the scenes. This is the rules-based elements of the scenes, like walls, line of sight, that sort of thing. We have the actors, which is the name, as I've mentioned already, for the players and the non-NPCs, and items. But assets like images, sounds, maps, especially the tactical maps, they're not part of the world. You have to link them from your hard drive, or if you're playing on a virtual server, from somewhere in your server, to the world. And how do we do that? Well, I could just import a picture from my hard drive, but if I was going to archive it, or things changed in my hard drive, or if I wanted to give it to someone else to run, then what would I do? Would that someone else try to use the link to access my hard drive? I hope not, and I think not. What we need to do is to have it in a form where we can export all the assets, not just the assets that belong to the world. And to do this, we need to create a module. So we have a world already. We need to create an add-on module. We know that add-on modules come in many forms. Many of us obsessively download them and build them up onto our world like a house of cards, ready all to tumble down at once when we update a version. Included in add-on modules, as you may know, are premium modules or other adventure modules. And so what we're going to do is package our world as an adventure module so that we could archive it and run it for different groups, perhaps at different times or even concurrently, or give it to other people, or even put it out for publication. So the first step in creating a module is to exit from here, log out, and we go into our setup, and we go to add-on modules, and create a module. So we're going to call it and I'm going to call it a module just so that when we're looking at our file structure we can easily see it's the module, not the world. This is created again automatically. I don't think our version could be 1.0. I think it'd be far more appropriate to put 0.1. I don't think we need to change any of these other things. Authors, I'll add an author just in case it's something required. And the most important thing to do, but if we forgot, we can always just edit the module later, is to add a compendium pack. Because the way that a world communicates with a module is via a compendium pack. We see in our world that we have a compendium packs tab. Essentially what we're doing is creating a module with a Compendium pack, and it's through the Compendium pack tab that we can import stuff from the module and indeed export stuff back to the module so that assets can be swapped from one to the other. So we'll add a Compendium pack. We'll call it Strife and Grimbone pack. I'm wondering if I had a typing macro for Strife and Grimbone, it would be useful. And it's not a journal entry, it's an adventure. We need to create a Compendium pack adventure. You can see though that you could have a pack of items that you could share between worlds by just adding on the module, or some other things like if you had the same encounter tables for different worlds, different adventures, you could have a pack of scenes which would be maps that you could use in different worlds. But here we're doing an adventure. And because it's an adventure, it needs to have a system, and we're using Pathfinder 2nd Edition system. We don't need to worry about relationships. That's if we had add-on modules that required other add-on modules or were desired other add-on modules to make them work. And so we've created a module. What does that module actually look like? If we go into my directory here, my Foundry VTT data modules directory, these are all the ones I crazily downloaded because I've obviously been infected by the sin of greed, can't stop downloading free modules like I suspect some other people. We can see here Strife and Grimbone module, that's the one I've been practicing on already. This is our new one, Strife and Grimbone walkthrough module. What's in it? Well, just a couple of little sort of placeholder files. But we're going to start populating that. What we now need to do is go back into our world and attach the module to our world so the Foundry VTT knows that they're associated with one another. Strife and Grimbone walkthrough, launch that. Game master, no password. And we see, here we are, back in the introduction and PC information. We had an adventure background. What we do now is go to the game settings, manage the modules. The only one we want to use is our adventure module, Strife and Grimbone walkthrough module. Click that, save the settings, restart. Now the module is attached to the world. How do we know that? Well, as you might guess, it's via the Compendiums packs. And we can see now that the virtual kind of placeholder Compendium pack that we created when we first created the module appears here, but it's going to be empty. And for some reason it's locked, so we right-click it and unlock it. I always ignore warnings. Let's go living on the edge. We open it, and we see here Strife and Grimbone pack, create adventure. We can't just port stuff directly from these tabs into the Compendiums pack for some reason. What we have to do is create an adventure, which seems to be for the third time, but let's do it. And we could have an image, but we'll do that later. Let's go back to our blurb, so we've at least got that. And copy that again. Make it nice and justified. So we have a summary tab, which is information about the adventure, and a contents tab. What we do now is convert the information that we have in the world into the Compendium pack that's affiliated with the module. So all we've created so far is the journal, and we can drag that. So everything in subfolders comes across. That's all we have there. What's in green is stuff that's going to be added to the Compendium pack in the module. What's red is stuff that's going to be subtracted when we rebuild the adventure or build the adventure from scratch. And what's yellow is stuff that's been modified. So one has to be careful. If there's yellow stuff, there might have been assets that have been altered in the world that are going to overwrite the version in the module. So we need to be careful that when we've made little changes in our world, these are changes that we wanted to keep in our archive module. We'll build the adventure. That was successful, and now we have an adventure, the Strife and Grimbone adventure, and there would have been a picture if we had one. Our overview is there, and there's been one journal entry and two folders. The two folders are introduction and PC information. The one journal entry was the adventure background, which we can see there. If we do import adventure, that's copying all the assets from the Compendium pack module into our world. So if we were using a premium module, for example, and we added it into our world, we would have a blank world. We got the module added in as an add-on module. The next step would have been to import the adventure to get all the world assets from the module version, from the Compendium pack version, into our world. But we don't want to do that. We would just be importing stuff that we'd only just exported. So after all that, what I think is a bit of a rigmarole, we can't just simply press a button and package a world into a module. Ooh, can you remember what we were trying to do? Hard to remember, isn't it? But now we've got to try and navigate our way through that maze spell and recall that what we were doing was we wanted to put a picture, we wanted to attach an image. But all we've done is ported assets that are part of the world into the module. What we wanted to do was to have communication of assets that aren't part of the world, so that those are all part of the package. So what we need to do now is to add other things to the module that will allow us to have it all in one place as a package. So what we do now is maybe have a look at the module again. And now you can see in the module, Strife and Grimbone walkthrough module, there's a pack. And inside the pack is the Strife and Grimbone pack. And there's a little bit more stuff here. When this fills up, there's a database file, which is an efficient, memory efficient way of storing all the information. So you can see text strings of the journal entries or features in the character editors, that sort of thing. Even perhaps location data on where the walls go that are put on the scenes. All this is contained within the pack. So this is the world information that's part of the module. Now we have to add in the other assets. So what we can do here, we can use any directory structure we like. Here's the module here. When I've looked at premium modules, they usually have a folder called assets, so I see no reason why we would break from that tradition. So we created an assets folder within the module and click that, and within that let's have an images folder. Now from our hard drive we want to transfer the picture that we wanted to show in our journal into the Strife and Grimbone module and into the images subfolder. So I'll just do that now. I'll go into my practice version that has it. Then into our module. That's done there. Our GM's introduction. The PCs find themselves in the lakeside fishing town of Pindaka. Where's Pindaka? Let's have a map. So here is the Insert Images tab, our source. So it's navigating here, and this is the Foundry VTT version of our directories. module, we need to find Strife and Grimbone walkthrough module, the assets that we just created, the images folder, and there. If you want to get a preview, we can click on the thumbnail view and see it there. Select the file, whoops, insert it, and there we have it. It seemed quite a rigmarole, but now we've done it once, it's going to be much easier. We can put all our assets, our sounds, our tactical maps, our other images into the modules folder ourselves, and when we are updating our journals things, we update the Compendium pack, which we will show later, and everything's packaged in the same place. So we want to finish our introduction. And we will just change the formatting to justified and look nicer. I like to have a little bit more formatting by adding these lines before or after different assets. Like that. Save that, and it's in the view there. Now, if we're doing a pen and paper version, it would be nice to have some GM's notes, because people might be using this and not listening to a long-winded video. And so let's have another page of GM's notes. This adventure should raise PCs from level 1 to just turn level 6 by the end. It is the first in the series of adventures that involves the PCs thwarting another Rune Lord rising, while along the way also dealing with guild politics in the city of Kermaga, and the war between the Orcs of Belkzen and the undead hordes of the Whispering Tyrant. I've mentioned unconstrained by physical printing costs, this module is more extensive than the typical published adventure path. I've expanded descriptions and encounters to provide more detailed suggestions, for example regarding combat tactics. GMs and players relatively new to Foundry VTT may benefit from tips provided in secret block text, as I've shown you, to help set up and run encounters and other activities on the virtual tabletop. So perhaps I'm making an excuse for being too verbose and long-winded. My point is that if our only limitation is gigabytes or preferably just megabytes of storage, we have far fewer constraints than a poor professional game designer who may have a print run or a maximum print page size and have to constrain everything. You can see the limits that they have to work under when they have to make an adventure path module that's going to span 4 levels, and those 4 levels have got to have a certain amount of experience points, and those experience points have got to be packed into 70 pages or whatever. There isn't the opportunity for players to skip sections or to go on different paths, and you can imagine therefore that they're fighting a battle against the criticism of railroading and linear adventures. Without the constraints of physical space, we can expand in other areas. We can perhaps accept the fact that players aren't going to do everything that we put down, and still have enough experience points to make it a reasonable challenge for the encounters going forward. And then finally I say the module's maps make full use of line of sight. Well, that's pretty standard for Foundry. Lighting and sound and region effects, we hope, which is new to version 12. Multiple tile layers allow revealing of features and traps dynamically during exploration. I've tried to automate as much as possible in the way of creature and hazard actions and effects. And then finally in the introduction, I think it's good design to give the GM an overarching summary of the adventure, so they've got a feel for what's happening, who's the main antagonist, and what's the scene. So I like to do an adventure summary in the introduction. Oh, that didn't seem to work. Create a new page. So here we'll get a bit of story, a synopsis of the adventure. Something that happens here, do you notice that the text is slightly less thick? The font is slightly less thick at the bottom paragraph. The formatting seems a bit strange. So what I like to do is just check for that and clear the formatting so it's all the same boldness of font. We've got history now, GM's introduction, GM's notes, and adventure summary. If you click this button here, you get a kind of scrolling view of all the pages at once. If you want to save space on your screen so that more is the tactical map, you can minimize this, so you just got the text without the titles. So we'll finish this video by going over the adventure summary. The PCs answer a call to aid from the mayor of the lakeside town of Pendaka. Pendaka there. They are asked to investigate the situation in Grimbone, a mining outpost deep within the sinister forest of Ashwood. There has been no word from nor contact with the outpost, upon which Pendaka depends for its trade in silver and meteoric iron, save for superstitious mutterings and the rantings of an unreliable drunk who claims that Grimbone was attacked by a host of fiends. The PCs must journey through the dangerous Ashwood to reach Grimbone, where they find the town besieged by fear and supernatural terror. It is widely believed that there was indeed a visitation by devils, who took away with them a number of townsfolk. In fact, an unscrupulous gnome illusionist named Nemo, in the employ of the Orcs of Belkzen, has discovered a hidden Thessalonian ruin and silver mine, and he and his beast folk, living vestiges of slave races who once served the Thessalonians, are using kidnapped townsfolk as slave labour. Illusions and mundane disguises were all it took to persuade the impressionable town that his followers were devils from the nether planes. But there are other more sinister forces at work in Grimbone. The repopulation of the area has awakened a long-dead Thessalonian cultist of the Rune of Sloth. The undead cultist is now known only as the Master. He wants the town for himself to satiate his vampiric desires, and sets the PCs on a path against Nemo and his brutish cohorts. After all, if you follow the Rune of Sloth, why would you do the work yourself if you can get PCs to do the dirty work for you? After exploring Grimbone and its environs, the PCs are told by the Master of the location of a hidden crypt of a rival Thessalonian cult dedicated to the sin of greed. A mask kept within the crypt will allow the PCs to penetrate the illusions that conceal the Thessalonian ruins and mines. Once they have the mask, the PCs storm or infiltrate the ruins to free the townsfolk and defeat Nemo and his beast folk. Eventually, they may discover the lair of the Master and face him in a final showdown. Further adventures may lead the PCs to pursue the present-day revival of the cults of the Thessalonian Rune Lords and their goddess Lysala, deal with Nemo's masters in Belkzen, or uncover other Thessalonian mysteries hidden in the Ashwood. And I think that's a nice place to stop. We've done the introduction of the adventure. What we've covered, just by way of recap, is we've created a world, we've made some journal entries by way of introduction, and we've found out how to import images and format the journal entries a little bit. And the most technical thing we did was to have a module version of our world to allow us conveniently to attach assets into the world that in Foundry VTT aren't actually part of the world, the more memory intensive assets, and that allows us also to archive our world, run it with different groups at different times, and put it up for publication as well. So thanks very much. Next time we're going to do the chapter 1, Pendaka. We're going to create a scene and start adding in some automation for dice rolling and much more fun besides, I'm sure. So thanks again. Thanks for your forbearance for a long video, and hope to speak to you next time. Bye.